If anything happens to you, those assets will eventually transfer. But if you're in a situation where you become incapacitated and now you can no longer direct your own affairs financially, medically, without that document, hands are tied.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know, it's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
Yeah, it's career therapy, it's comedy, it's definitely full on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, it's Erin here doing another interview. And hey, before we get started, I just wanted to pause for a second. It's a few days before the Thanksgiving holiday. This will release after it. But I'm just sitting here feeling so freaking grateful for all of you that listen. I was actually in Minnesota last week. We did a tailgate book tour, a 50% rule tailgate book tour event in Minneapolis that was amazing. It was at a jewelry store, if you haven't heard. That's what the 50% rule does. It makes you do new, fresh, maybe even crazy things. And I was most surprised at how many of these mostly women that I'd never met in person, most of them I've never even met at all, listen to the podcast. So if that's you, like I saw you, I see you, I celebrate you. I passed it on to Nicole, who we FaceTimed for a little bit. She wasn't able to make the trip, but it keeps us going. And so just encourage you. We've said it before. We're always open to feedback, topic suggestions. We're definitely open to ratings and reviews. It takes like a hot second. It's our love language. But most of all, just wanted to express my gratitude for you being here. So now to our episode. This is something, we've done over 250 episodes. And like I said, for the Constantine interview that we did on how to better interview people, which was, I don't know if it was I think it might have been last episode. I lose track. We are talking about finances, which we've totally talked about before, financial planning and different sort of aspects, getting the raise you want, et cetera. But this guest, like we've never talked about things this way. And when I met Karen Coyne, about a month ago, she said something that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have you on. And she talks about a lot of things, but one of the things she mentioned that I was like, oh my God, yes, is that we don't talk enough about what I would just call this sort of hoarding and this black box. And there are so many people I know who are itching for maybe not early retirement, but a breather, a break, an exploration of a new job, a new vocation, maybe their own thing. And, it's always the money that holds them back. And it's always the same thing. They are in the situation nobody else is in. Oh, but you don't understand. I have kids going to college. Oh, but you don't understand. We have a new mortgage. Oh, you don't understand. We have, aging parents. It's like everybody has something. And not everybody can afford to just kamikaze out and give up their income and their job. But I think more than ever, and if you're listening, there's a good chance you're one of them, where you have this sort of phobia and this hoarding mentality and actually this black box that you actually don't even know what the impact would be. And I can say this because I went through it. I not only left my income of my big sort of fancy CEO title, but same almost the week that I stopped getting a paycheck, my husband, who works for the federal government, stopped getting paid for 6 weeks, because every once in a while they like to do that. And you know what? It was a real wake up call, because the old Aaron, the black box Aaron, would have been like, we're gonna be homeless, we just can't even survive it. And the reality is we were totally fine. And this concept of constantly accumulating, which I'll talk about with Karen, or, some call it just like the normal approach of delayed gratification retirement, and just always the same curve, I think needs to be dispelled. I think it needs to be dispelled for you. And I think you need to think about money differently. And I think you need to get comfortable with it and potentially comfortable with its getting off the damn curve for a little bit. Maybe tapping into savings. Maybe looking at not just waiting until you're 65 to start living your life. So Karen Coyne, she is amazing. She's a CFP, a certified financial planner. She's the founder of Clarity Planning, which is a part of Raymond James. And she's also the host of a podcast called Money Without Math, which I freaking love, even though I was a math major. And she likes to say she deals in the real and is the antidote to shaming and shitting. So obviously needs to be on this podcast. That's all about authenticity and doing shit your own way. Here are some things we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about why this obsession with accumulation can be harmful. But we're also going to talk about the size and performance, which she's so sassy and talks about like there's an obsession with the size and performance, that it's all about the markets and returns. And it's really misguiding you. And looking at financial planning really is much more human. It's much more holistic. It's much more authentic. I dig into selfishly, but because I know some of you have the questions too, like we're behind on our estate planning. So I asked some very selfish questions. You can fast forward if you're all set with all your estate planning, which I think is such a pretentious word and maybe part of the reason. But I'm freaking 50. Like I have 2 kids. Like we need to get our shit together. And so she helps with just someone like I ask the dumb questions that maybe you're thinking too. We also talk about the great wealth transfer, which I hadn't really thought of, but there's the big thing going on because of the boomers, because of the wealth transfer that will be happening over the next, 5 to 10 years. And what does that mean to you? And then lastly, she has a story that her son has some advice on how to be number one. I'll just leave it at that. And it's really adorable. And you're going to be quoting it. And it's amazing. And it fits with the authenticity theme. All right. I'm going to shut up and send you over to my conversation with Karen Coyne.
We met about a month ago or so. And I told you that we've done, of course, podcast episodes. We have over 250. We've hit financial aspects. And it's always, a topic people are very interested in, right? Money matters. But there was something about our conversation that I was like, oh, we need to talk. And what we talked about is that there is oftentimes the focus is on save, save, save. And there's this one formula and save all the way till retirement and sort of hoard it almost. And we talked about executives in particular, or maybe not even somebody that considers them executives, that maybe that's not the right course and that is something that you want to shift their mindset around. Let's talk about that. Yeah. So, we were talking, I have a podcast called Money Without Math. And so the idea is to do exactly that, to shift the focus away from this constant obsession on accumulation. And financial services, you were in financial services for a good chunk of your career, and it's very male dominated. And as such, it's obsessed with size and performance. And so, I think what happens is a lot of us didn't grow up talking about money necessarily with their families. Or if we did, it was, I don't know about you, but in my house, it was money doesn't grow on trees and, things like that. But so we were kind of left to our own to sort these things out. What is a Roth IRA? How is this asset taxed versus this? And along the way, a lot of the financial literacy is really focused on retirement and along with that, accumulation. And so what happens is if you're really successful, you're great, you're doing a great job of saving and investing and putting money away. What I often see is that you actually outgrow some of that basic financial literacy to where it actually can become dangerous and hurtful for you instead of helpful, because it's talking to someone that you no longer are. A lot of basic financial literacy is very foundational. It's maybe people that need to manage debt, things like that. And so, you get to a point in your career where those aren't your top challenges anymore. And so that focus isn't doing you a service. Yeah, I mean, I've experienced this myself. We were taught, right, do the basics, save, 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 accumulate, accumulate, accumulate.
And, it hit me. I actually had a mentor at work that had taken some time off work. And so, of course, when she came back, and when I say taken some time, like 7 or 8 years, when her kids were sort of mid-stage, not when
Took
they were,
7 or 8 years off.
yes, and then came back. And what she said to me was really profound, is that part of her reason was she had this sort of spreadsheet, and she realized that at the point in time when she was really going to be set was also the point in time when her kids were going to be gone. And that didn't make sense to her. So specifically, this concept of like the one curve, I don't even know if they call it. I saw something delayed gratification, retirement. You said accumulation. There's like this one curve, right? There's this one formula.
It's one-dimensional line that is
One-dimensional line.
probability of success, Erin. It's so important, this one-dimensional line. Yeah, and the problem is we don't live in one dimension. We live in a very messy, haphazard, crazy world. And it's funny because we were laughing about, me being a planner and you being on brand with authenticity and not letting me plan for this episode. But it's funny because even the name planner, I take issue with that. We can't really truly plan and prepare for every eventuality. But I think we can train, we can get reps in, we can set ourselves up so that when life does punch us in the face, that we can get up more quickly. We can bounce back. And then when life punches us in the face again, we do it again. We get back up on our feet. So I really think like planning is a misnomer, but it's, we got to get past that one-dimensional line. Not sure if that's where you were going, but
Yeah.
it's one-dimensional line. And yeah, I have a problem with that. I have a big problem with that.
So let's talk to the listener who's thinking, yeah, like I don't want to retire yet, but I've been thinking about taking a breather, taking 6-12 months off, probably to, sort of figure out what they want to do next. Maybe they're in a job they don't like. Maybe it's a, career they don't like, or it's, I want to experiment with, starting my own business, but I'm not sure I want to do that forever. What should they do? Like, a little bit of math probably, but what should they do that maybe they're not doing today to get that money thing out of a black box that I feel like so many people are just like, but I can't do it because I've got kids going to college and I've got a mortgage and I blah, 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 blah. What steps can I take?
Yeah. I mean, this is a conversation I have, especially as people are getting closer to retirement more often. It's that, and they're thinking, can I take my foot off the gas a little bit? Like, can I just downshift? And so usually that starts with being brutally honest, doing an inventory of, not just assets and income and liabilities and expenses, but energy and demands and time constraints. And so just, kind of doing like a deep, thorough dive into all those different aspects and being very real. And I think it helps to have someone, maybe someone who is an advisor, planner, trusted, advisor, like a accountant maybe that you work with or a financial advisor, who can say, Erin, the numbers aren't your problem. The numbers are there. Like, you can definitely do this. Then you realize, oh, shoot. Oh, this is me. I'm the roadblock. I can't blame the math anymore. I can't blame the numbers, because usually if there's a will, there's a way to judge the numbers, right? People will find a way if they truly want to do something. So it's maybe, whether it's changing where they live, somewhere, that's less expensive, or paying off a car, or, having conversation with their kids about where they're going to college before they make that decision, by the way, like years before, so they don't have their heart set on going to Boston University when you have a more of a state college budget. So it's, it's a combination of, again, just being really brutally honest, and then I think also being brutally honest again with yourself, and not just letting the numbers, not just hiding behind the numbers.
Yeah, no, and I think for us, we started working with a financial planner maybe 6-7 years ago. And to your point, the first thing, it was about right? It was all about who can manage our equity and our assets to the fullest, right? And some of it was, bring them all into under one place. And I remember the first few years, us doing the quarterly sort of, we got to update your financial plan and the projections. And I was like, yeah. But how are things performing in the market? Let's talk. And it took me a while to realize that seeing things like, here's your projected right now assets that you're going to leave to your kids, which I love my children, but right now, and we are not like independently wealthy or, rich by any means. I want my like normal, leadership people to hear this that are making a decent income. We are leaving way too much money to our kids, So I think just having that clarity of like what is sort of the end state, and that you're not, I think everybody's just worried I'm just going to run out and become homeless.
Yeah.
So how do you get people to sort of understand that truly that planning part is so key to them making decisions about, what they could do now to, take a little break, tap into savings, et cetera.
Yeah. It reminds me of a client who makes a very good income. She's a medical director. And she grew up in a very frugal household. I think like a lot of us did, I mean, like my parents did the best they could with what they had, which was one income and a modest income. But, they did the best that they could so that we lived within our means. And so this client, grew up in a very frugal household, and now she makes more money than her parents, had ever seen in decades. Like they've never earned anything like what she does. And I remember her telling me when she bought a new vehicle, she bought like a really nice luxury SUV, and she was feeling so guilty about it, just feeling so guilty. Like, I can't believe I spent this much money on a vehicle. And a lot of that stemmed from these scripts that are just built into our DNA because of how we grew up and what we think we should be doing, and all the articles. And you turn on social media and it tells you what you should be doing with your money. But the thing is, for her, is she already was doing all the right things. She was already maxing out her 401k. She's already adding additional funds into her brokerage account. She's giving very generously now while she's relatively young and healthy. She's not waiting till she's doing all the great things. So I was like, listen, uh, you can afford the vehicle. You gotta tune out, and it's so hard. It's so much easier said than done. But like these messages that you're receiving from the media, they're not talking to you. They don't know you. They don't know that you're doing all these great things. And so sometimes you have to have a little chat with yourself. Like, am I doing the things? Am I putting money away? Am I paying off debt? If it's check, check, and check, then sometimes not everyone needs a budget, right? And so sometimes I think that's again where I was saying these kind of financial literacy scripts hold us back because they're speaking to someone that's not our situation. They're not speaking
really
to
good.
us.
That's really, really good. I mean, one of the things you talk a lot about is just this barrier, this fear that we common folks, women and men alike, don't necessarily know all the terminology, how things work, and that can sometimes hold us back. Tell us more about how you've seen. I know I used to run a financial company, and I still Google the crap out of like financial terms. So I'm still illiterate. How do people get through that, and what does that hold people back from doing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it is a huge barrier. I see it all the time. Generally, and especially with smart, successful people, executives, MBAs, accountants, attorneys, physicians, right? People who are highly intelligent, but they come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, help. I hate this stuff. I don't know anything about this stuff. And usually there's a duality. After we dig in, there's one of two flavors that will present itself. The common one is, actually, you've been doing all the right things. So you're coming to me and you're saying, oh, Karen, I don't know anything about this stuff. Like, I worked in finance, but it was on this side of the house, not this side of the house. And then when we do your inventory and we have the conversations, it's like, oh, but actually you're doing all these great things. You have an emergency fund, you've paid off this debt, you've got 529s, whatever it is. And so usually there's this mismatch between you're doing the right thing, but you think you don't know anything. Or in some cases, someone thinks that they are doing all the right things, but it's very narrowly focused on size and performance, and they're missing all these other aspects of preparation. in the case where, someone thinks that they're stupid and they don't know anything, I think it's really important if you are working with someone who helps meet you where you are and doesn't continue to make you feel like you're an idiot by speaking in lots of jargon. I mean, my belief is that, again, financial planning, it's such a misnomer. And it's less about the numbers and the technical stuff than people think. And that's because we're fed the steady stream of the Dow dives, soars, this many points, that many points, inflation projections and targets. And so we're constantly fed this diet of all these terms that actually on a day-to-day basis don't impact how we interact with money. And it's a huge mismatch. And so, I think when we actually take a step back, whether it's ourselves or through working with someone, and we see, actually, it's okay that I don't know what 99% of those terms are, because I really don't need to know what those terms are. Now, if you're interested and you want to learn more about them, great. But, the reality is, you don't have to know what the standard deviation is, or the alpha or the beta, or, like you really don't to make good financial decisions, and prepare well.
I love that. So let me be vulnerable and admit one place that we are woefully behind in our financial planner. Every quarter, has it on the checklist, and then we don't do it. And I think part of it is it's a little bit of a black box, because it's such a big word to me, the estate planning. So a lot of our listeners are Gen X. We're going to, talk more about the great wealth transfer next. I want to ask you about that. But can I be indulgent? Can you just give us like the dummy's guide and get me off my high horse, and hopefully a bunch of people that are listening, to do the stuff around estate planning that I should be doing?
Yeah. Well, and can I ask you, I mean, what is the holdup for you? Is it thinking about, not being there for your children? Is it having a sticky situation where you don't know who you would name as a backup after your spouse? Is it just, facing the what do you think is the challenge for you?
Honestly, I think part of it is one, logistics, right? Scheduling a meeting with somebody. And my husband, we already, we do that. Like, just logistics of putting it into our busy life, which is pathetic. I'm just going to be honest. And a little bit is just unknown of, okay, what does all of that include? Is that just simply like, to me, estate planning sounds so, like, it sounds so pretentious, right? I don't own an estate. I own a couple homes. Right? Like, that's why I'm like, if somebody could say, like, look, here, you're going to meet with somebody and it's going to be simple, and here are the things you're going to go through, because it isn't those other barriers. It really is just the like black box of it, I think. And logistics.
And one, I think it is just like this big, huge thing. It just seems like it's so complex. And to your point, if it's like, I don't have a complex life, I don't have an estate. We kind of think that maybe we don't need that. But I so appreciate you being so vulnerable, because you're right. This is something that, and this is in that category of, again, when I find that people are doing a lot of the right things, and maybe they think that they're doing the right things because they're so focused on performance, and the performance isn't great. But then I find out, oh, okay, here's an area where, we have some work to do. And so usually includes estate planning. My personal experience was my dad died in a car accident when I was 15 years old. And so our lives changed, of course. Yeah. And he was the provider. He was traditional, stay-at-home mom. Dad was the provider. And also, she's not from this country originally. Her English to this day is very broken. And she didn't work much outside the home. So, I mean, he was a provider in every way. And so when he passed, she was left with all these decisions to make and a whole new language to learn. And that was a lot. And I think to have to grieve, and you have days where you can't even get out of bed, let alone know where the car keys are, or, do we have fresh milk, or is it the same container that's been in there for the past 2 or 3 weeks? That is such a horrible time to make big, important decisions and learn a whole new language. So I really encourage folks to to find a way to lean into the process now, even if it's just doing the most basic version of the documents to get them done. And in the case of my parents, if my dad hadn't have done a basic level of planning, we would have been destitute. Like we would have been destitute. And so, that's a little bit of a sidebar, but it does tie into estate planning because estate planning is about, not leaving a mess behind for your loved ones.
Yeah.
And I recently did a couple episodes actually with a friend of mine, Joshua Charles, who's also a certified financial planner professional, to talk specifically about unmarrieds, because I don't know how much of your audience or how many of your, audience may be partnered up, but not married. Maybe it's their second marriage. Maybe they never want to get married. Like we've seen what the numbers are, and that's a new norm.
My co-host is not married, right? Nicole is not.
Right. And I think so. There's a couple things that tend to happen. One, if we're married, we may or may not realize that we have some built-in defaults. Like we have factory, defaults that are built in. So, if I'm married and I die and I don't have a will, God forbid, well, at least, assets will eventually get to my spouse, depending on your state. Typically, that's going to happen. And usually that's what we want. Estate planning is super important if you're not married, because the default may not be what you want. It may not be what you want at all. It's going to be, usually next of kin. And let's say you have a lifetime partner, but you haven't actually, been married. They may be less recognized than as Josh says, your second cousin twice removed. So I would particularly encourage some urgency for those who are not married, because your factory default, as afforded to you by your state, may not be what you want. And even if they are what you want, it's just a messy process to get from A to B, usually without those documents. Uncle Sam's not going to take the whole thing. That's not the issue. It's just that it's messy. And then lastly, if you have children, married or unmarried, it's so important. So again, like what would have happened if both my parents had passed away in that car accident and they didn't have an estate plan? Well, then, the state would get to decide who would take custody of the three of us. And that's a horrible, horrible process for anyone who's been through that. So, I think there are many, many reasons why we tend to put off estate planning or avoid it or think that maybe it's not for people like me. But anyone who's over 18 needs some basic documents. And the most important of which is the power of attorney document. I don't even think it's the will for most people. It's actually the power of attorney. And that's because, again, there are some factory defaults, as I call them. If anything happens to you, those assets will eventually transfer. But if you're in a situation where you become incapacitated and now you can no longer direct your own affairs financially, medically, without that document, hands are tied, and if you're a parent of a now 19-year-old, without those documents, you don't have the same powers that you did just a few years earlier. So that power of attorney document is so, so important. And then the will, one of the best pieces of advice that I can share, that was shared with me by an attorney some years ago is, it's so difficult when we think about the future and we think about like infinity, we think about how our kids are, how old they are right now and maybe their ability to make decisions. But what about like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? What kind of person will they be? Will they be able to handle making decisions? And even if it's not like, again, like we're not, Bill Gates over here, but if you add in the value of your home, not just your liquid assets, but like life insurance proceeds, all the things, and they're 21 years old. Well, sorry, but even most grown adults our age are going to have a difficult time making good decisions, let alone someone who's, 21 years old. And so a great piece of advice that was shared with me that I share often is just think about the next 3 to 5 years. If something happened to you yesterday, what would you want to have happen? Who would you want, to be the guardian for your children? How would you want those assets to be dispersed? Would you want it to be in a lump sum? Would you want to put some guardrails around it, which is usually the case when there are even young adult children involved? And then you can always go back and modify it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because we can get stuck. We can so easily get stuck thinking about all the potential, like, choose your own adventure pathways that our kids' lives can take. And so just shortening that runway, hopefully will make the decision making a little bit easier.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.
What do you recommend around finding, I'm assuming it's a law firm, like how do you find the right partner? There's so many options out there, right? There's the do-it-yourself, there's the traditional, like any advice on finding the right place to actually do this?
Yes. I believe if you have any complexity at all, you need to work with a professional who specializes in estate planning, not real estate.
Yep.
Not litigation, estate planning. Now, again, for your kids are 18, they need basic documents. Can they go online and use one of those programs? Sure. But as your life becomes more complex, you do want to set guardrails. I think it's so important. And usually, if you're already working with an advisor, they can usually provide a couple names. And I think it's really important that you not just look at their credentials and they do estate planning, but someone that you feel comfortable having a conversation with, being vulnerable, asking questions, because it's a lot. It's a lot, and you really want someone who can walk you through the process in a way that helps you feel like you're making decisions that are good decisions, and you understand maybe, okay, this is what we're doing now. Here are some other ways that this could play out in the future, but for now, this is what we have, and you understand why you have it that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you for indulging me, and hopefully, I assume our listeners, there's some of them that are just as behind on that, so that's really helpful, and that kind of gives me the kick in the pants to take care of.
Well, and
list item.
it's you're not alone. We all struggle with it to some degree. And physically, I was having a cobbler son with shoes moment the other week when I came across an old account, just a small account that I totally forgot I even had. And the beneficiary is my ex-husband. And I'm just like, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Karen. Oh my gosh, you are like the proverbial cobbler son right now.
Yeah, we all are. We all are.
Absolutely. We all are. But then my last word of encouragement with that is don't try to feel like you have to have all the answers before you pick up the phone. And I encourage you to set the appointment, to be in action, to start the process. And then once you have the appointment, you have the conversation, then that will, beget the next step. And then that will beget the next step.
Yeah. I love it. I would imagine too, a lot of them are doing these virtually these days versus, I think like I said, part of it's just logistics. My husband commutes an hour each way every day. And so like adding in another, like, oh, we have to meet, on top of kid schedule and everything, that always like clutters the brain a little bit. But I would imagine that a lot of this can be done virtually.
Yes.
So that, I think that's always been in my head. Like we have to find a time where he can somehow, leave work early, and but that's probably not the case.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad that you called that out because that's absolutely the case. Maybe not to finalize the documents, that usually is an in-person, but you can do a lot of the prep. And include your financial planner in the process.
Yeah. I will go back to them.
Yeah,
I think they've given us names, and then we're like, yeah, and then we move on with our busy day and don't get to it.
Yeah, names, but also they can help you with some of the groundwork so that when you do go into the meeting, it helps you make the most of your time with that professional, right? So understanding that you have different types of assets that have different legal mechanics, right? Like your uh, life insurance and retirement assets, those all have a built-in beneficiary designation. Your bank accounts may not, unless you added a TOD. Your straight brokerage that's not retirement usually does not, unless you added a transfer on death or payable on death type mechanism. So it's very important to know what type of assets you have, what categories they fall into. And then also, I think just having a basic understanding of some of the key documents, what they are and why they're important. And then some of the possibilities, again, that we kind of alluded to, in terms of adding guardrails, in terms of naming backups to backups. Um, it's, it's helpful to think through some of those things so that when you do go into that first meeting with the attorney, you're not going, there's so much.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think to look at that, or I didn't think to bring that. So I just think that little bit of preparation can help you be a little bit more present.
Yeah.
Because it is so much.
Well, and I think you are a unique unicorn too. I mean, I do think understanding that people, I think we did have a call years ago and they brought on somebody to talk about it. And, it was intimidating, right? It was a bunch of big words and fancy words. And then you're just like, oh shit, I don't have the brain space for this right now. And I love your approach. I think that's so important in what you do, that you get that you have to sort of break it down and talk to people like they're human and not be a blowhard. And I think that's very rare.
That's financial services, man.
Like you said, it's an old boy, and not to put all the men in the same category, but it is definitely an industry where there is not a lot of time. A lot of people sit back and think, "Oh, wait, now I figured all this out," but it's very unlikely that my clients have, and I can actually do better if I break it down versus try to look like I'm smarter. And I think that's sometimes the ego comes in and they just assume, well, they're going to want to fire me if I don't sound smart. And it's like, no, actually, we want you to dumb it down. We're going to like you even more. We're not going to think you're stupid. We just know that you're thinking of us.
So true.
I want to talk about this great wealth transfer. I heard you speak on another podcast about it. It's sort of fascinating. Tell our audience a little bit about what's going on.
Oh my goodness. So there's this great wealth transfer that's underway, which is happening as the older generations pass and leave money to subsequent generations. So, older boomers and the generations ahead of them I was just at a conference, and I think they said there's 7 living generations right now. 7 generations, from the greatest generation or the silent, I always get mixed up which order, all the way on down to
Alpha.
Yeah, Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
7 generations right now. Wow. Well, as those older generations are passing, money is in motion, and it's, being left often to Gen X, like our cohort, and also millennials. And women in particular stand to inherit about $30 trillion by 2030. And
why women? I heard you're focused, why?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times it's because it's going back to your estate planning, setup. It's the women that usually survive their spouses. We live longer than our spouses. So that first line is the spouse. And so women in particular, between spouses and then, of course, children, that's going to look different. But women in particular stand to inherit more money than, it's like untold or unseen in the history of,
unprecedented.
Unprecedented. I try so hard not to have a word. Thank you for there's got to be a word, but it is frankly unprecedented. So, yeah, it's just, and you just think about how much the landscape has changed since you and I were growing up. Mm-hmm. And, wasn't that long ago that woman couldn't even get a credit card in her name. And so, to have this big wealth transfer, which women stand to, and, the wealth transfer itself is let's say it's 70 million. So again, we cut that roughly in half. By 2030, that's how we get to
70 million or 70 billion.
Trillion.
Trillion. I was gonna say, I think it's a bigger number than million.
Yeah. Trillion. Thank you. So yeah, yes. So a lot. And I think this is so crazy, for one, not just because of the amount of money, but 2030 is not that far away. especially, especially now around the corner of 2025. Maybe by the time this comes out, it will be 2025. 2030 will be here in the blink of an eye.
So how should our listeners think about that? What are the sort of unique ramifications?
Well, I think taking it a step further, if you've been in that camp of, I hate this stuff, I don't know anything about this, now is the time to find a side door in.
Yeah.
Find a way to engage and create an interest because, you may be dealing with this in some form or fashion. And again, you don't want to be blindsided by it. You want to be somewhat prepared so that you're not dealing with grief and making these big financial decisions at the same time. So really encourage folks, if they are feeling like they're in that category of, if you already have an advisor, but maybe you've been delegating to your spouse to do all the meetings, be present at those meetings. Sit in on the phone calls, even if you're not contributing, even if you're just listening. Then on the next call, it might be you're asking a question. And then on the next call, it might be like, oh, I remember that. We talked about that in our last meeting. I have a client, she's like one of my favorite stories that I share. We've been working together for probably over 20 years now. She's one of my earliest clients. And when we started out, she was so phobic about money. And again, this is someone highly intelligent, in the medical field, highly, highly intelligent, and emotionally high EQ, high IQ, like so smart. And when it came to money, she was like, oh my gosh, phobia. I can't, I don't want to, do not show me a chart or a graph. Like, don't, I'll just panic. And so I was like, okay, fair. I won't. Let's talk about this instead. Let's talk about what is your next 10 years look like that you're envisioning as you wind down and winnow down your practice and look to retire. And so we focused on that. And that was really the beginnings of like this whole, MO of mine, was because she was vulnerable and articulate, or was able to articulate, this is how I feel. Please don't, share these charts and graphs with me. And so again, long story short, she's now the go-to person in her family. She is the one that people are like, will you be my executor? Will you be my trustee? Will you be my power of attorney? This woman who was so phobic years earlier. And what happened? She showed up. She showed up again, and then she showed up again, and then she showed up again. And over time, it's just like acquiring a language or developing other skills. It just can't happen if you don't show up, put in the reps. So find a way to create an interest. And again, it doesn't have to be that you have to learn how to chart stocks and read, these charts and understand like what is happening with every company and the S&P 500. No, in fact, not at all. That's why on my show, we talk about all these other things. That's exactly my hope, is to create a side door for someone to come in and say, oh, I am interested in that. Let's talk about micro weddings, or let's talk about, workplace energy, whatever it is. Like, let's talk about something that's maybe connected to money that's not directly, charts and graphs and performance. So that would be the first thing, is I would say just find a way in. What is something that you can connect with so that you can show up and lean in and get comfortable, so you're not doing all this education, later at a time when you're less equipped to deal with it.
Hey guys, Erin here. Stop. Do not do it. Don't fast forward. I have something too important. I have a couple of very passive aggressive questions to ask you that you don't want to miss. Here they are. 1, do you find yourself often comparing yourself to others? Like, they work harder than me, they get noticed more than me, they have better luck than me, they're smarter than me. Or do you also just feel exhausted from having to always work as hard, if not harder, than everybody else to stand out and succeed? I know you have these challenges. We all do. And this is why I wrote the 50% rule. And I know you need to read another book, like you need a hole in the head. But I'm telling you, this book and this rule, I'm obsessed with it. And it has changed my life. It has changed the lives of others around us. And it has also been the formula for success behind so many successful people. Savannah Bananas, Hamilton, Weird Al Yankovic. The 50% rule is the simplest shortcut to stop comparing, stop copying, stop chasing other people, and like literally compete in your league of your own. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I stop myself and I'm like, oh, she did a talk that I wish I could do. She's got more. No, it doesn't matter because we don't compete in the same league. I compete in a league of my own because I am constantly 50% ruling things. So if you're interested in this concept, which by the way is more fun as a team sport, but at least start with yourself. You cannot miss this book. It's not only powerful, it's really freaking fun to read. That is always my number one goal. It was my number one goal with my first book. It's my number one goal with the 50% rule. I want to make it enjoyable to read it. Why? So that you read it. So if you feel like you are stuck with these comparison cramps or just all the symptoms that I talk about in the book of sleep running syndrome, self-doubt gout, and pioneer paralysis, and well, you have to read the book to find out more, then just go buy the darn book. Easiest way, go to Amazon, search the 50% rule, and I cannot wait to hear how you 50% rule things.
Two more questions. Buck that story. And I definitely want, whether it fits in here or not, I want our listeners to hear the story about your son.
So, my son recently, he's in 8th grade, and persuasive writing. They're doing this chapter on persuasive writing. And so as part of this unit, they had to do a presentation. And, we were talking about the presentation, and he was saying, gosh, Mom, I'm a little, we've been working as a group on this presentation. He's like, a lot of kids in the class, they're all doing PowerPoints. They're doing like these big fancy PowerPoints, and we're doing a skit. Like, do you think that's okay? And I'm like, do I think that's okay? I think that's amazing. Tell me about the skit. And so the skit was hilarious, right? It was about like the world's most indestructible pencil. So they had a skit where like someone had pencil and they easily broke it. And he's telling me, and I'm dying. I'm just roaring. I just think it's hilarious. And I said, listen, by this point, like he hadn't presented yet. Kids had already presented. And I said, what did you think of the PowerPoints? Like, were they good? No, actually, they were pretty boring. I was like, were any of them funny? Like, did any of them engage the audience? And he's like, yeah, no, not at all. And I'm like, okay, do you see what you're doing with your skit? Like, this is the purpose, or this is the whole purpose behind your unit, persuasion. Like, you got to connect with people. And my goodness, if you can make people laugh, like, that's a great way to connect with people. So, you guys are going against the grain, but this could be really, really impactful. And oh, by the way, you're always telling me that like the stuff you learn in school is useless, and who needs calculus like in their real life? Actuaries, probably.
Not even.
Cybersecurity. I think I saw that the other day. They need some calculus, but I was like, Bud, these are like actual real world, situations that you're in right now, presenting and persuasive speech. And he said, well, the thing is, in order to be number one, you have to be odd. And I'm like, whoa. Wait a minute. I'm like, you're right. That's absolutely genius. And I'm like, you didn't think of that by yourself, did you? And I'm like, where did that come from? And he's like, oh, TikTok.
Of course.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's, when everyone around us is doing something, it can be so hard. Even if we know in our heart, like, I don't want to do a PowerPoint. Like we're doing a skit, and the skit is great. But when everyone around us is doing something, the doubt starts to creep in. I think no matter how confident you are, it's difficult. So anyway,
it's such a, and you know what? Who cares that he got it from TikTok? The context he put together along with your coaching. I love that you just simply asked, like, how did you feel when the other people do it? Like that's such a good trick, right? Like crap. Well, then don't do the crappy one.
Right.
But I love also the irony of, your brand sort of being, money without math. And then, the play on the math there. With the one and odd.
And
I think
the
it's
one
so great.
odd. He's like, get it. And I think, like, because I didn't get it on the first take. That's not what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking about, one being an odd number. I was thinking about, you're right. Like to stand out in anything, you're not doing what everyone else is doing. It's inherently what it means.
Love it. Such a great story. Before I ask you the last question, I know you're working on a book and a TEDx talk. You've got so many great things while you're also running your business. What's the best place for people to find you, follow you, keep an eye on all the good things you've got going on?
Yeah. So I'm probably most active on LinkedIn, trying to gear up my Instagram, but I just feel like I'm not a native Instagrammer. I'm
Me
so
neither.
much more comfortable in LinkedIn. I just don't. But it's there, if you search Money Without Math, I think you'll find us. And then my website is raymondjames.com/clarity.
Love it. You're doing such great work. Well, the final question that we always ask is, what's your final tip to make work suck less? Or maybe it's money suck less, but like, what's the one final tip to make all the things suck less?
Oh my gosh. I mean, a couple things that come to mind, one of which is connected to the TikTok wisdom, I knew for a long time that I was a marathoner, not a sprinter in terms of being in business. And that I wanted to move at what I would consider a sustainable race pace.
Mm.
And, I saw people around me, like when I very, very, very first got started in my career, I was given this mentor who was, putting numbers on the board, lights out, be like her. Well, guess what? Her flame quickly burned out, I think within 6 to 12 months. She just became so negative and overwhelmed. And I think like that constant focus on being a sprinter was part of it. I don't think it was all of it, but I definitely think it was part of it. And financial services, and I'm sure financial services isn't the only industry, but it's very much focused on like, what have you done for me lately? What numbers are, on the board right now? And, and it's funny because again, with planning and with markets, we're often saying like we're taking a long view. It doesn't matter what the markets did this month. We're not selling this month, right? We've got a 10-year, 20, 30-year plan. But there's this constant dichotomy of like, what are you doing now? What's happening right now? So all that to say, I knew relatively early on that I'm not a sprinter. I'm not built that way. I'll burn out. And I really love what I do. And so I want to do it for a long period of time. And so I just kind of committed to maintaining that race pace. And then once you do that, once you kind of put a stake in the ground, then that helps you make other decisions, like how many meetings you're going to take a week, or maybe when you're not going to take meetings, and, just other boundaries that flow from that. So I think it's really important to know, what's the pace that you move at, and then that you set boundaries accordingly.
I think it's such great advice. And with all the gurus and mentors and quick hits, it's so easy to get caught up into that, right? And want the quick and then, but realize it comes with the price. And I relate with that. Even though if you would ask me 5 years ago, I would say, oh, I'm a sprinter. Like I like to go quick with things. Well, I think I've really changed with that,
Yeah.
with building my business and my speaking career. Yeah, there's a lot of things I could do, but that means I'd be working 60 hours a week and wouldn't be able to have some of the flexibility with the kids. And I think that's a message that's really important for people to hear, that you can kind of choose your own pace and you don't have to sort of emulate the pace of everybody around you.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and especially if you're in a corporate
Yeah.
fast-paced
Yeah.
but look, like, oh, I think that was my other thing was, make time to breathe, to come up for air, because you can't do these things. You can't reflect if you're constantly scheduled back to back to back to back meetings. Like, you gotta create that space. I call it in praise of inefficiency. Like, efficiency is not that great all the time. Like, we can't always be optimizing for everything. We need time to be bored. We need time to be inefficient, and good things take time. Whether it's you're crafting an email that is, instead of adopting the corporate one, you want to craft your own and put your own, heart and personality into it. Well, that might take an hour. It might take 2 hours. I mean, sometimes like crafting these, right, certain messages are really difficult. So you need time and space to do that. And then the last one actually that I thought of that unfortunately, like everyone can't apply right now. But I always jokingly say, like, the best hack is to be 50 years old or older because like, no, like that's when your estrogen dips and so do your giva.
Yes. Yes. 50, you shed the F.
Shed it. You shed all the weight of the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and it is this magical shedding that takes place. And I just, I wish I could just grant it upon our younger colleagues that, are struggling with so many of the questions around balance and the pace and these things that do naturally, I think, that I see all around me that tend to get a little easier as we get older and certainly after we cross 50.
I love it. I love it so much. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Karen. I'm so glad we had the conversation. Thank you for letting me do it without all the prep and planning. It was amazing. And I know our audience will really appreciate all your insights. So thank you.
Oh, I hope so. I hope that there's something that they can take away and really enjoy the conversation.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too.